Okay, so we're going to do an evaluation on these hooves first. Now, the one thing I want you to know, the horses were relatively the same size, but this horse here, which was a Polish type Arab, was much bigger boned than this horse here. However, this horse here, the other horse with the lesser bone, had bigger feet than this horse. Now, the reason for that is because in natural hoof care and barefoot trimming, you're taught to incorrectly and over trim the heels to try and attain the wild Mustang hoof look, and to also get a ground parallel coffin bone. And both things go hand in hand. If you are going to have a ground parallel coffin bone, you have to over trim the heels to attain it. And I'm going to show you why that is. I'm going to show you how in the anatomy what they're really doing is they're reducing the size of the hoof capsule and they are crushing the inner heel. Because, and this has been a big debate in hoof care for quite a while, about whether the coffin bone sets at an angle up or whether it is ground parallel, meaning it sets flat. Now, I had a coffin bone, and I would have liked to have shown you that. My glove isn't fitting too good here. But I think my dog got it. This has happened a number of times, by the way. Okay, so some of the differences in the hoof here, we're going to look at the bottom of the foot first. And some of the differences you're going to see, we'll just do, let's see, this foot and this foot first. I think this is a front foot. It might have been a back foot. Irregardless, it's about the same. Okay, so one of the differences you're going to see is that from here to here is much wider. And that is because the shape of the foot being oval, as the heels are incorrectly trimmed, at first they think that they go back like this, but then as you keep trimming them back, they actually start moving forward, like so, crushing the inner heel and spreading the bulbs wider, like this. Unless, of course, you have deep central sulcus thrush, at which time you can also get contracted heels like that. So one of the things you're going to notice here is that this foot is wider. The bulbs, they're very wide and stretched here, but if that was what you were used to seeing, you might not notice that. On this horse here, you might think it had deep central sulcus thrush, but it didn't. That's solid right there, solid. And the heel bulbs are really actually how they're supposed to be. Notice the length. The length from here to here is actually longer on this foot here than on this foot. Like if we were to, and look at the bars. Let's look at the bars first. Look how short the bars are. This is because as you incorrectly trim the heels, as the size of the hoof capsule is reduced like this, since the bars grow from this area, they get shorter. Now look at, really there is such a big difference in the bars here. Let's look at this. These bars are about 4 centimeters to the end of the heel buttress. These bars are, if we get to where the bar actually ends, some of this is sole right in here. Bars should end right about here. These bars are actually almost 6 centimeters. So that means that, let's see the difference? That's how much of the foot of the back of this horse has been trimmed out and compressed into a smaller capsule. The capsule, since the foot is, well, 2/3 fat and cartilage, once they're trimmed a certain way, you can take that foot and just bind it up in a smaller capsule like that. So that's really interesting. The length of the bars, this is what you're wanting to look for in a healthy hoof. Another thing, the shape of the frog corium. Now I should have got this other foot out here, just a second, so that as I was doing this, I could show you the internal anatomy. Just a second. I put him back in there. Kind of a mess. I need a towel. Hold on. Just a second. Okay. Okay. We're gonna go ahead and look at this foot here. Now it might be a little windy. Sorry about that. Okay, so you determine the correct foot and the anatomy by where it grows from on the internal foot here. So, as you see, the shape of the frog corium that grows the frog. Okay, you notice it doesn't go way out like this. The only reason it would do that is if when the heels were being incorrectly trimmed and the size of the hoof capsule was reducing, now this foot, it had perfect heels. So it was never, the heels were never crushed. The size of the capsule was never reduced. And so what happens is, you see how wide this is here? This frog corium that should look like this, as the hoof capsule is reduced, gets pulled, the bulbs get pulled wider like this. That's why you have the frog growing like this. Now, let's look at this foot here. Notice the shape of the frog corium is the same. We'll move this over here so you can see it. The shape of the frog on this hoof is the same as the shape of the frog corium on this foot. This is a completely relaxed foot. It was never distorted. The heels were never trimmed out. That's kind of what it looks like. Now it's kind of contracted now because it's been soaking and kind of come apart there. But it would have fit on this foot. Okay, so that's one of the big differences that I see here. Another thing is the actual length of the heel. Now, if we were to measure the heel on this, now all these horses were around the same size. Okay, if we were to measure the heel on this, from where the hairline would be, right up here, to the end of the heel, we're going to get, we're going to get right there about 1.5 inches. Let's see. See, it's kind of hard because it's, you know, it's at an angle, so heels are like this. Let's see here. It's about 1 1/8 inches. 1 1/4 to 1 1/8 inches. Right there. Okay? Now you wouldn't want your heel to end right there, would you? You'd want the heel buttress to keep growing so that you could have about 1 inch of sole. Is not that correct? Okay, so with the trim I do, we suggest trying to get the heels to 2 inches, but that's not written in stone. They really wind up being, on your average size horse, about 1 3/4 inches. But there's a whole process to getting these heels to grow. It's not just growing the heel wall. You can't just do that. Because if you wind up just growing the wall, you wind up with the same heel you have here in this foot. They're just longer. There's a whole process to getting this foot to extend again and to open up the heel, the sole in the heel platform right here. Okay, because see what's happening is you're shrinking this way. This way. The foot should be about like there, about out to here, and you've just pulled it all in like that into a smaller capsule. Okay, so we're going to measure these heels from the hairline to the end of the heel. This heel here is really exactly 2 inches. Now, she was needing a trim, so I imagine it would have come out to about 1 3/4 inches on her heels if you got down to live sole here. All right, now let's measure the heel on this horse. And again, I believe when I remove the hoof capsule, and I will video it, that this foot will come out much easier than this foot. And I'll show you why. Okay, now we're going to shorten this up right here to the end of the heel. We have about 1 1/4 inches. The way I was taught to trim the heels was down to the periopal flap, or 1 1/8 inches right there. So if this horse, a lot of barefoot trimmers would think this horse was ready for a trim, they would take the heels down to 1 1/8 inches, about there. Both heels are about the same. about 1 1/4. So you know that this horse did not really have, we're going to find that he really didn't have much sole, because you cannot have much sole if you don't have enough heel buttress growing past right here. This right here is the heel buttress corium. It grows a big, huge, thick chunk of hoof wall like this that stabilizes the whole back of the foot and the hoof wall. Now that heel, it has to start growing here. It supports the back of the foot. See how it would lift the back of the foot right there? Okay, it starts growing there. It grows down the back of the heel here. Then it must grow past the heel, at least that far where I got my thumb, so that you would have sole in here. So most barefoot horses do not in reality have a lot of sole. All right. So let's see some other differences. Let's measure the dorsal wall. Okay, now let's measure the dorsal wall on this foot first. Because even though these feet might be relatively somewhat of a different size, all internal feet are the same anatomically. They're very close to the same anatomically. They do differ in size a little bit. It'll be interesting to measure these feet in all these aspects and see what different sizes they have, if any. Okay, so we're going to measure this horse here from in the center of the dorsal wall to what would be the hairline, which is right about there. Okay, so what is that? That is 2.5. I'm really bad at measuring. I'm sorry. If we did it in centimeters, well, anyway, it goes to right there. You would think I'd be better since I'm kind of a builder, you know. So 2.5. So a little over 2.5 inches right there. See that? And I found that to be common. Actually, if we put it right there to the hairline, right there. It is exactly 2 1/2 inches. Okay, what is this horse here? This horse here is to the hairline right there in the hoof capsule is 3 inches. So about 1/2 inch maybe of sole, if that. We'll find out because we're going to absolutely measure it when we get the hoof capsules on. Now what about this horse? Well, quite a bit more. Quite a bit more. Here, let's see. There we go. What do we have here? We have almost 3 3/4 inches. Now this horse probably could have used a trim. Really super good, correct wild foot that I've examined has actually 1 inch of sole. Uniform sole ridge around the whole thing. Okay. So these are just some of the differences we've seen. Now the tack trim is based on the inner foot and on growing the capsule to fit the inner foot. And the tack trim is fluid. Even though it has a mapping system and basic measurements, it's fluid in that each foot is different, and so you have to approach it in different ways and do different things in order to get the foot to grow back correctly to the inner foot. But the mapping does have guidelines. So how long would the bars be on this foot? Probably they would end right about here. The bars would be about to the end of the heel buttress, would probably be about 2 1/4 or so inches or more. How about here? Okay, so that's just about right. See there? For that bar. But not on this bar. Look at there. Okay. What about the length of the frog to the back of the foot? Let's examine that. How we do that is we're going to hold this up here, and we're going to just put that there and that there, and that is 3 1/2 inches. Okay. Now let's do this one. Now remember, your bulbs are part of the foot, right? Okay, well there you have it. You see how much shorter this foot is than this foot. Now what happens, and I think I explained this before, but I like to repeat things a lot, is that at first it seems like you're making these heels wider when you take them back to the base of the frog. There's several different ways people trim heels and describe it, but they all do the same thing. They eventually trim the heels out of the foot, and eventually, you know, you bring them back here, it seems like they're getting wider, but what actually happens is after you trim this buttress totally out, like so, well then you start trimming, every time you trim, that hoof capsule's getting smaller and smaller, and it's actually moving forward like this. And what happens to these bars here, is they just start going like this, and then they get shorter. See, that's why you'd have that shorty bar. So when we're restoring the foot, there are things that we have to do that as we grow the hoof capsule back in, it starts to change the position of the bar, the heel starts moving back, and we correct the foot so that the capsule, once again, fits the foot. This capsule would not actually fit the true foot that's inside of it. The capsule is much too small and incorrectly fitted. All right, well, that's just a few things that I see right now, the difference in these feet. And so in the next video, I'm going to trim around the top here so we can get ready to take the hoof capsule off. All right.